All right. Rock and roll. Rock and roll. Slurred that first word. That's not a good thing for the rest of this podcast if I'm already slurring the first two words. Welcome. Tuesday, February 4th. And yesterday, you know what? First of all, like super producer Stacy always tells me, hit the subscribe, hit the like button. We need some help. This is an organic thing. This is our thing. Please leave some comments. I'm getting better with the iPhone, so I'm going to start responding more. And, tell me what you like. Do you want me to concentrate on one story? Do you want 3 or 4 different little stories? Right now I'm doing 3 or 4 little different stories, and every so often really plunging into something a little deeper. But yesterday was my dad's birthday, and he's so cute. 86 actually. And he has pretty much Alzheimer's, pretty much full blown. And, it can be an incredibly frustrating thing. Hopefully nobody out there has to deal with somebody, but they're beautiful people. But they just don't remember things. Sometimes they don't remember who you are. It's just what it is, I'm lucky my dad, even though he does have Alzheimer's, he's happy. He's not angry. He's not bitter, whatever. So yesterday, me and my mom took him out to Olive Garden for lunch. He loves Olive Garden. He loves it. And he's eating, and he was an elegant eater. I mean, he would eat oysters in a half shell. He really knew how to eat. He knew the right forks, the right spoons. I mean, he knew the bottle of wine that went with it. He was just elegant. And now it's more a thing of survival. It's kind of cute. Like he'll eat a hamburger and he'll eat the bun, and then he'll eat the piece of lettuce, and then he'll eat half the patty, and then he'll have the tomato. And, he just goes back and forth, and he's just trying to eat whatever's in front of him because that's what he's concentrating on. He's trying to work on it. And so he's eating the spaghetti, and it's, he's not really cutting it, and some is, he's slurping it a little, and, it's okay. It's no big deal. So at the end of the meal, I said, okay, Dad, it's time for us to go. And he says, oh, I got to tie my shoes. And I didn't really think anything of it. And I'm conversing with my mom, and we're talking, and I see him, and he's bending over, and he's trying to tie his shoes. This is going on for like a minute, and when you're dealing with somebody who has this horrible affliction, you get incredibly patient, because things that could take normal people 10, 15, 20 seconds takes them 2-3 minutes, and you learn just to let the process play out. And so he's tying his shoes for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I'm just going to help him out, look over. And I look, and he's wearing slip-on Skechers. And I'm thinking, he's been trying to tie his shoe for 2 or 3 minutes. What's going on? And I look, and he dropped a couple strands of spaghetti on his shoe, and he thought they were shoelaces. So, God bless him. He's trying to tie spaghetti into a knot on top of his shoe. And I was like, okay, sights and wonders. Sights and wonders. And happy birthday, Dad. It's a beautiful life. All right, so we've talked about extensively Donald Trump was going to impose tariffs on Mexico, China, and Canada. And he paused them. The pause starts today. They were supposed to go into full force on Tuesday, February 4th. He paused them for 30 days. For Canada and Mexico, because he said he, quote unquote, got concessions from those countries. And Reuters is reporting that the White House is now eyeing the European Union. We talked about that too, about him having disdain for UK and their buying practices and selling practices with the US. You also have to realize something. We are the richest country in the world. We have more people than everybody, all these other countries, except for China. And, we want a wide array of products to be able to buy, from the cheap to the very expensive. You want Scottish wool. Okay, some of the best wool in the world. Well, you're not going to really settle for American, but, it is what it is. BBC is reporting that Mexico announced by President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to reinforce the border with troops. In return, the U.S. will limit the flow of guns into Mexico. And that's kind of a very important story. I'm going to tell you something that I experienced with respect to that. That's one thing about this podcast. I've had kind of a cataclysmic journey, I guess would be a good way to put it. But I worked with this gentleman. I mean, in my former career, before I became the greatest podcaster ever, I was a union carpenter. Hopefully I don't have to go back to being that. So I worked with this gentleman, and he had a green card. He was from Mexico. He worked next to me. And one day he was going home and he got scooped up by the police. He had a traffic ticket, some type of warrant. I forgot what it was. And he got deported. I didn't see him the next day. I didn't see Jimmy for like 3 or 4 months. And then he came back, and I eventually met him on another job site. And I said, hey, what happened? Give me the story. And he said, I was going home. I got pulled over. They took me to jail. They found whatever it was some type of violation. This is under Trump. And they deported him to Mexico. Now, he had pretty much lived his entire life here. His parents were illegals, but he lived his pretty much from the time of 2. He was here. Didn't have citizenship. He was applying for citizenship, whatever. And he's in Mexico. He doesn't really know what's going on. So, but he could speak Spanish, which is incredibly helpful. And he was going to the border to try and figure out how to sneak across the border. And he said that the cartels control the border flow of people coming in. We have these pictures of people in Juarez or whatever, and they're at the river, and there's 100 of them, and they're just going to go across the river. And he told me, he goes, that's just a show thing. That's for the people who really don't want to get across, who can't afford to pay a coyote or the cartel. And I said, wow, how's that work? And he says, well, I went to this small town on the border outside Tucson on the Mexican side. And he said, I had my family wire me money, and I think the amount was like $2,000 for him. And the cartel was going to sneak him over. And he said there was a group, 10, 12 people, and the cartel snuck him over. And it was like a 3 or 4 day process. They were going through the harsh Arizona desert, and they finally made it to their destination. He said it was tough. He goes, we mostly traveled at night. The heat was too much. We had women, no children, he said, but it was men and a couple ladies. And we got there, and we got to a house, and that was, quote unquote, the safe house, right? And he says they're all sitting there, and, somebody brings in food and whatever. And he can't wait to get back to Southern California. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get a ride. And, another thing is, he was lucky enough to have a cell phone, but sometimes people get scooped up and they don't have a cell phone. And how do you know what number to call? I mean, really, I got a cell phone with probably 500 contacts in there. I literally don't know one number. If I lose my cell and I don't have the iCloud backing it up, literally, I am excommunicado. I cannot converse. I do not know anybody's number. Okay. So they're in the house. And the gentleman, or whatever we're going to call him, the head honcho, let's call him the head honcho, comes in and says, okay, you got 6 hours to get out of here. He goes, after that, you're on your own. and you make arrangements, whatever. But he said, I have an offer for everybody here. He says, anybody who will go back to Mexico. Now, remember, these people have spent 3 or 4 days coming up and finally getting in America. He said, anybody who wants to go back to Mexico, we will pay you $1,000 a rifle to carry them back in. He said out of the 10 people, I believe, 8 said, yeah, I'll do it. And they literally strapped on 10, 12 AK-47s and went back into Mexico. They spent the 4 days. And that's how the cartels get their guns, because the United States is incredibly effective, or I thought until today's announcement, at stopping the flow of guns into that southern part. And I was surprised that Trump agreed to that, because let's make no mistake, the gun lobby is huge with the Republican Party. And it may sound good. I mean, I'm surprised. I mean, I know Trump's not going to tweet about that, but the gun lobby is only about one thing. That's just making money. Okay? They don't care how many people die. They don't care how many kids get slaughtered in schools. They just want to turn a buck. Whether it's killing here or killing there, they don't care. They make a profit, All right. So Canada, in their pause, announced that they're going to spend $1 billion and include, in part of that, 10,000 frontline workers to halt the flow of fentanyl from Canada into the United States. Justin Trudeau also announced yesterday that he will appoint a fentanyl czar and launch a joint task force with the United States. Okay? I don't know if any of you have ever been up to Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, where we have a common border with Canada. But I've been in Montana, and I am telling you, it is just 100 miles of no fence, no nothing. Just do what you want. There's not even a barbed wire fence. There's nothing. It's literally, okay, this section over here is Montana. That section's Canada. Good luck. The tree is the marker, whatever. We look at the southern border with Mexico and say, wow, the wall sucks and whatever. There's no wall up there for a huge expanse. There is nothing going on. And I'm sure these criminal organizations are using, get the fentanyl or whatever thing they want to import into the United States above Montana and just drive it in. Nobody's going to stop you. Except maybe that Chinese weather balloon from a couple years ago, right? We'll see. So obviously we're getting those borders reinforced. It'll be interesting. I really don't think the tariffs are going to go into effect. The stock market, until before the tariffs were paused, went into kind of a free fall, but it rebounded after there was a 30-day pause on it. Seemed to rebound a little. The S&P was only down 1% for the day, which isn't really that bad. AP is reporting that our favorite Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says El Salvador has been kind enough to offer to accept deportees of any nationality, including violent American criminals. This is something that kind of really rankles me. You could actually say piss off. I got other words for it, but Stacy says I can't cuss for the first 10 minutes. So let's go over what is really going on with our prison system in the United States. We are going to outsource now another segment of our prisons. The Sentencing Project, this is an independent organization that monitors the prisons in the United States, says that in 2022, about 8% of all state and federal prisons were privately run. Now, these are for-profit enterprises, and like most things that are for-profit, they don't really care about the humanity. It's just turn a buck, let's just do what we do. kind of like the Trump administration is trying to turn the federal government into not serving the people, but serving the private enterprise aspect of the world. Opponents of privatization of prisons have always argued that they are more violent, they give less health care to the inmates, and one of the big things is they put their prisoners more quickly and for longer durations in solitary confinement. Let's be honest. You got a guy, he's a little bit of a problem, just put him in solitary. Who cares? So in a typical prison, let's just say he'd been there for 10 days. Oh, leave him in there for 100. Who cares? What's the matter? We're just going to break him mentally. I've met people who have been in solitary confinement in the prison system, and they said it literally starts to break you. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Alone. I love that show. And they basically take 10 people, they go to a certain geographic region, they put everybody at 2 or 3 miles apart from each other so they don't intersect each other, and literally see how long they can last. They give them some rudimentary tools. They're all smart outdoorsmen and women, but basically the concept is how long can you handle without human interaction? And most of the time it's 60, 65 days, something like that. That's where they start to break. Because even though they're talking into a camera, kind of like I'm talking into now, if you don't get any feedback, there's something in the human system that breaks. And it's really devastating to see these people at the end just going crazy. They've got food, they got fish, they got whatever, but just not talking. You can see slowly how they start to break. And the same thing goes in prison. You throw somebody, Andy Dufresne, in solitary confinement, there's only so much that a human can take. So let's go over some of the prison statistics, because I think this is going to be a big thing by the Trump administration, that they are going to start deporting people to El Salvador. And make no mistake, the president of El Salvador, he met yesterday with Marco Rubio in San Salvador for a couple hours. And this is just another money grab, right? This is just another way to, quote unquote, privatize the prison system on a cheaper level. Now, let's talk about how the United States incarcerates people in this country. At the end of 2023, God, what a different world that was, we had almost 1.8 million people in prison in this country, okay? The U.S. spends $182 billion a year on incarcerating people. Now, this is according to the BBC. Now, listen to these numbers. Spain's incarceration rate per 100,000 citizens is 113 people. France, these are all going to be per 100,000 citizens, okay? France is at 109. Germany at 67. Obviously, they're not too big on enforcing drinking and driving, but, hey, whatever. Norway, 53. And Japan, one of the lowest industrial countries, at 36. Now, what do you think out there? This is Final Jeopardy, okay? How many people per 100,000 U.S. citizens do you think the United States incarcerates every year? Has incarcerated. So the leader in the clubhouse is Spain at 113, right? The United States, Alex, my answer will be 541 per 100,000. Well, John, you would be correct. Welcome to Scorched Earth. That number is just mind-boggling. Now, I went deeper into the statistics because, I know my audience really wants to know what's going on. 46% of the prisoners currently incarcerated in the United States in federal and state institutions are for drug-related crimes, okay? We've seen marijuana get reclassified in certain states. It's still it's still a level 5 in the federal government. I don't know why Biden didn't declassify it down to a level 1. Level 5 is heroin. Marijuana is up there with him. I don't know why Biden didn't decriminalize it, especially after he lost, after Trump came in. But, let's just put more poor people in jail. Let's just do that. That sounds great. 59% of women in prisons currently are in there for drugs. 45% of the men are in for drugs. Now, according to the ATF, 15% of people in federal and state institutions are there for gun crimes. So, hey, we want to save some money. Let's just ban guns. Sounds like a win-win, right? At least we don't have to, put little kids from Uvalde and other schools in coffins, right? The kids don't have to buy the effing bulletproof backpack. What a country. And finally, Marco Rubio is getting quite a bit of it today. CNN's reporting that Marco Rubio says that he is now the acting director of USAID, which is basically a humanitarian agency which gives aid to other countries, not the typical aid that we think of when there's a disaster or there's not military aid, but if there's a famine or there's a flood, we typically will give aid to other countries. Well, this is a smaller agency, which budget is somewhere around $125 million a year. And they go into certain little sections, and I guess they help with food. Basically, it seems, I really couldn't get a breakdown of what it is, but it seems like they're mostly helping children and people who are starving in areas that are not making it up on the radar too much. So Rubio said yesterday in a letter to Congress that he'd delegate P. Marco, there's a winner, a Trump appointee from the first administration who was in USAID, and he has been accused by humanitarian and aid groups inside the United States of his sole purpose is to dismantle it. And he is being given free rein to dismantle this agency. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and a lot of people want to talk about isolationism and we only need to do what we need to do for us and we have to look out for us. And especially when we talk about the WHO, that we pay $455 million and China only pays $50 million or whatever that number was. And that's true. But at the end of the day, if you're in your neighborhood and you have insurance on your house, you may not be paying the same as everybody else in the neighborhood. Sometimes there's people who pay drastically less or drastically more. But at the end of the day, are you happy with the insurance you get? Are you happy that you're helping people who are less fortunate? It's funny, Christ talked about how you treat the lesser of society is how you view the world. And it's so true. At the end of the day, do we want to help those who literally can't help themselves, or do we want to abandon them and say, hey, sorry, it's like the animal kingdom. I watch on BBC, hey, only the strong survive. Everybody else, you need to die. I don't want to live in that world. That world is effed up. And I just won't accept that. And that's what we do here. We try and highlight these things. Marco Rubio is a POS, okay? I'm trying to be good, Stacey. At the end of the day, he is sitting there saying, you know what, these kids, these people who are starving, we can't do that. No, sorry. And you know why? Because they got to give the tax cuts to the rich in 6 months. They're going to expire in 6 months, and we got to make sure the rich get their tax cuts. Yeah. What a day. We only got 4 more years, people. Only 4 more years. All right. Thank you for listening to the Scorched Earth podcast. I'm John. Please hit hit the subscribe and like button, and leave your comments. I will talk to you tomorrow. Peace out.